People who have worked for the ultra-wealthy, what are some of their deepest, darkest secrets? Story 1. There's a few, but having a private pictures painting of yourself in the foyer of guest house was one. I couldn't believe it. Layel. Edit. I don't say matriarch because she was like his third or fourth wife and way younger than he was. Story 2. I did a week worth of work on the ranch of the guy who invented the fleshlight. Man was loaded. He had a giant house with a Spanish fountain out front, a spa gym office with a huge Roman-style pool and statuary, an attached walled garden with stone Buddha statue and an Indian tiger tower, a massive barn, and his own disco club. It was quite the compound. His dark secret was that he was kind of boring and down to earth for what he's famous for. Every day he'd drive a UTV around and look at the birds. His wife was quite nice too, though maybe a little out of touch. She complained about how hard it was to buy legitimate antiques, the aforementioned statues, etc., because countries were cracking down on exporting cultural relics. They treated me well, would come around to check and see if I had enough water, would come chat with me for a bit each day. Honestly, pretty nice people. Story 3. His biggest secret was that he knew most people only liked him for his wealth, including his present wife, 2 kids and 2 stepkids, and they'd cut ties in a heartbeat if it disappeared. Story 4. Worked for 3 to 4 billionaires, was in construction management, and did multi-year remodels of some homes and some new builds. I've been on their jets, yachts, visited 3 of their 9 homes, drove their cars, helped move Picassos across the 30,000 OESQFT house, you name it. My biggest takeaways are 1. That many of them have no real understanding how the real world works. 2. It's often a lonely, fearful, and sad life. They stress over who is trying to take advantage of them. My wealthiest client ever drove a Prius because she was afraid of being targeted. They paid to have 247 security at the house cause. They fear the eat the rich crowd and live in paranoia. Their kids have nothing to aspire to, no dreams, and any accomplishments are mere expectations. I got out of it because the stress was unbearable when pulling a rabbit out of your jerk becomes what you're known for, and the expectations are that you will always be able to do that. They throw money at your bosses and your boss agrees to the impossible, and then you have to get it done. Answer: this was my experience too. I manage properties for very wealthy and famous people. They are lonely at heart and think everyone is trying to take advantage of them. I gained trust over a long period of time, but their circle of people was very, very small. Most of them were terrified of how to raise normal children. Although they have more money than anyone needs, their life was indeed difficult. And I know that sounds ridiculous. Story 5. Had to entertain an oligarch for an afternoon once, but had no idea he was a legit oligarch with destroy the world amounts of wealth. The only secret I gleaned was you never know who somebody is. He dressed, acted, and enjoyed in all the ways a normal person on a budget would. I didn't get the impression that was an act for me, but he definitely appreciated that I didn't know or give a fudge who he was. I took him to a dive bar and for tacos after. My boss said the oligarch reported a great time and made sure I got the recognition. We have a millionaire in the extended family. Got it through hard work. He lives in a totally normal, albeit large house. He wears normal clothes and drives a normal car. Nicest guy you'll ever meet. Story 6. I worked at a place that sold very expensive watches and jewelry, which was frequented by the rich and famous. I would get in trouble sometimes because I didn't recognize them. Basketball players' wives, for example. These were a specific type of rich person, the ones who wanted others to know exactly how rich they were. I learned that there are brands that cater specifically to these people and are mostly only recognized within their own circles. A lot of ultra-wealthy people don't dress up when they go out. They can be plain or even sloppy. It was important to never assume someone's status. They are petty and will throw you under the bus in a millisecond if it will even slightly benefit them. While I worked there, I was screamed at, had things thrown at me. I saw grown men throw huge tantrums. They do it because they know they will get something out of it. Your work had to be beyond perfection because they would purposely try to find faults to exploit. I disliked that their behavior was always rewarded. I preferred it when their assistants were the ones we helped. Many of them seem incredibly isolated and lonely. Some would come and talk politics at us because they had no one else who would listen. Though, to be honest, we weren't allowed to express any of our own thoughts, so it was pretty one-sided conversation. Answer: I worked in a luxury jewelry store in a big northeast city, and this 50-ish guy came in. He had well-worn jeans, a plain button-up, and old cowboy boots. The other SAs willfully ignored him. I decided to talk to him, and it turned out he was a TX oil man on an anniversary trip. I sold him a $160K necklace for his wife. He was very down to earth and said he didn't know anything about jewelry, but his wife did, and would want something of very high quality and classic design. During 15 years in luxury sales, it always amazed how often SAs would fawn over flashy new money customers, which often turned into a lot of work for smaller sales while ignoring quietly wealthy people. Story 7. They are unusually cheap. Or, most I've worked for are. I'm in wine sales and cellar management, and I had a client who had over $10 million in First Growth Bordeaux and Grand Cru Burgundy, and he served 20 Pinot and Bubbles, Cava, at his Xmas party for his best friends and celebrities. Answer: I managed a Blockbuster a long time ago that was on the border between a lower middle class and a rich neighborhood. One day, some middle-aged guy started yelling and threatening to fight one of my employees. He was being an abusive prick, so I went to find out what the deal was. Guy was screaming over a 2.14 late fee. I mean, just absolutely plastering insults all over my employee. I told him he owed it fair and square, and to pay or get out, or I would call the cops. He stormed off cursing loud enough for the whole store to hear. I step outside to make sure he leaves and watch, in shock as he gets into a pristine white Rolls Royce. That lesson stuck with me. Story 8. A surprising number of them are hoarders, like mansion-level filth hidden behind marble gates. Rich doesn't mean clean. Answer: yeah, my buddy used to live with his multi-millionaire grandma in her weird huge house. Trash everywhere. Weird art on every wall. Walk down a hallway and there's just a miniature but still like the size of a car wooden Viking ship. I swear to Christ, there was a room waist deep with just doll heads. Just the heads. I asked my buddy about it and he said she wouldn't talk about it, and it had been that way since before he was born. Like, this is the shoot you can see. I would be absolutely unsurprised if there were secret passages in that house. After his grandmother died, there were people who simply refused to go to what was now his house because there's no fudge way that place isn't haunted. Story 9. He was divorced and married a second wife. He never divorced, and the second wife is a mistress that he parades around as his wife. Actual wife doesn't give a shoot as long as they're still rich, but won't let his second batch of kids inherit their joint assets, so he had to buy his second wife some income properties for security. She'll be okay though. He bought her 100 mil worth of income properties. Story 10. Worked in the tech investor startup space. Ended up at WEF in Davos one year. I remember eating a 32 hamburger, listening to a man brag about influencing elections in developing nations to support his commercial interests. He spoke so casually, like he was sharing old college stories. He shared missteps he had made in his political schemes that had caused civil wars, and lamented on the tens of thousands of lives that his errors had indirectly taken. Tipsy, at a bar on a mountain, He talked through literal crimes with the tone of someone who had effed up at their day job. I remember that he believed it was his duty to influence, that whatever underlying meritocracy granted him enough power to buy elections also required him to guide the poor, silly populations underneath him. He left me with the check for his beer. Story 11. They even sent me and my guys home with a bunch of stuff from their garden. Answer. There's a saying, money talks, wealth whispers. And in my experience, it's totally true. The richest people I know aren't super flashy. They invest in quality products, not flashy ones. I mean, shoot, my grandma is crazy rich, and she still drives a 15-year-old Toyota. It's not until you get house and see her multi-million-dollar art collection that you realize how much she has. The woman gave me a $20K painting once just because I said I liked it. Story 12. I used to be close friends with a kid who was best friends with a kid a little younger, whose mom's family was probably worth $5 billion. We would go over to his house and do whatever activity you could dream of. It was there. Every single night there were sterno pans with dinner from one of the local high-end restaurants if a chef didn't come in and make something. We would take the family jet to his apartment in a large city every couple months. Limo to hangar, get on, laid out food on flight, limo directly off plane and to apartment. One time his green stuff dealer in the city was out of town, so he asked me to bring an ounce for him, back when it was 400 Ws for high end. I had made the flight before, so I knew security was no issue. But as a 20-year-old kid, guessing, that was a huge expense. I felt awful bringing it up after everything we didn't pay for, and I did smoke, but not at his rate. We always sat courtside at basketball games, went to a club afterwards and spent north of $25,000, ate at the best places, etc. So I just ate it. We were in limo back to plane after that weekend, and he was fudge around with his bag and pulled out $1,000 in an envelope and was like, "My bad, man. I totally forgot to get you this." He was young, dude. Kind, soft-spoken, haven't seen him in probably 15 years. Story 13. My dad cleans houses, ranging from the tiniest studio apartment to houses with their own security guard and driveway in SoCal. The biggest houses, the cheapest, and most judgmental people. I once went to a house where their master closet was bigger than our house, 1800 XQFT. Story 14. I don't know if it's a deep secret, but they did seem to hide the reality from the image. They seemed like a stand-up Family Guy who'd created an empire from nothing. Their child committed tragic end on Father's Day, and it was a clear statement of why they were doing it on that day from people who were close enough. But the passing was very much hidden and written off as an accident and portrayed as something other than what it was. It wasn't an accident. It was a tortured soul's last outcry to their horrible, abusive father who was a piece of shit as an employer, so I can only imagine the horror he was as a parent. They chose that day to end their life, and even though I was a child when it happened, I remember realizing how much the day they chose was impactful in the grim circumstances. Story 15. This is 50 years ago. Worked for dozens of the most wealthy, think 100M and up crowd. Very consistently joyless, entitled, arrogant, and cheap, often overlaid with substance abuse issues, with notable exceptions. One of the richest, multiple billionaire, would occasionally come out and work with me. I was doing landscaping, maintenance, whatever. He asked me to help plant some strawberries, worked with me the whole time, and described high finance, how to shift risk to the other guy while retaining control and the lion's share of the profit. Easy going, super nice guy. Answer. I work in high-end home building. We do fancy kitchens and baths. And one time I went to take some measurements for additional work in a house we'd done a few years before. The client lets me in, never met him before, and the kitchen is absolutely thrashed, dirty pans and plates, eggshells, loose cereal all over, Honey dipper in a puddle on the countertop just wrecked. Apologies for the mess. And next thing you know, this multi-billionaire has a sponge and a spray bottle and is cleaning it up himself, while explaining that he had just finished making breakfast for their 3 kids and hadn't had a chance to clean up yet. And I got the impression that was a normal thing. The cooking, the giant mess, the him cleaning it up. Kept it professional, but in my head, I was kind of floored. Most relatable billionaire moment ever? We chatted for a bit, and he seemed like a genuinely nice guy. Story 16. The more money they have, the more problems they create to not pay you. Sign a contract, get a guarantee with clawbacks, and wait. Rich people are rich because they don't prefer to spend money, and they know they can out-litigate the little guy to avoid paying for it. CYA. Money, nothing. If you don't get it up front, the wealthier they are, the more you should protect against them up front. Billionaire client? Do a 70 up front and a 30 back end, and know who they trust to sign off. So if they aren't around, you can get that guy if they are off jet setting and unavailable. Best advice I can give. Story 17. I worked in the wedding business for 8 years. After a while, I was able to sniff out ultra-wealthy clients during initial phone calls or mails and always turn them down. Newly rich people have one objective: impress others. That's it. Nothing was ever good enough. Most wedding clients had timelines, which at most were broken into 30-minute blocks. I had one wealthy mother-in-law who had her timeline in 5-minute blocks. Yes, 5-minute blocks. After the wedding, she emailed me 6 pages of criticism, absolutely heartbroken that her daughter's golden hour sunset photos were delayed by 10 minutes because our champagne service was not efficient enough. I had one bride email me 6 months after her wedding to complain that we provided her a new staff member for her reception. Mind you, this person was extra labor. She was provided an extra server for free, as I always paid extensively for new hires to have on-the-job training before they were given real shifts. One rich bride was enraged that my employees put 2, and not 1, orange slices in her cocktail. By contrast, blue-collar people were almost always the nicest, laid-back, sincere, grateful, and high-tipping clients, with actual friends and family who had a wedding for all the right reasons. Old money people and self-made successful people, i.e. people who worked construction then launched their own businesses, were night and day different from new money, mostly IT douchebags, obsessed with impressing the Joneses. Answer: I used to work for a nonprofit, and some people there would periodically go around to mega wealthy people to encourage them to pledge their money to philanthropic causes. Not any particular cause, just something that was close to their heart. If you've inherited your wealth, though, all you know is how to spend it, so those guys didn't want to give it up. And then there's Oprah, who was the exception to the rule self-made billionaire who, at the time, didn't want to give a dime of it to anyone. Story 18. I got upgraded recently by a very kind hotel staff member. Got to stay at the hotel's exclusive floor. The rooms were really nice, but it was all the extra stuff. Exclusive lounge with free canapes, a selection of custom scents for your room, and a lovely dedicated concierge who seemed deeply confused. I didn't need him to do anything for me. Access to a spa. Later, I was sitting in that lounge, and a woman walked up to the concierge, gave him a piece of paper with her measurements on it, and asked him to have some workout clothes shoes sent up to her room so she could use the gym. As if they just have a magical chamber downstairs with everyone's exact size of shoes and clothes sitting there. She seemed perplexed when he explained they didn't and suggested a Lululemon store a few blocks away. She then said, "Excellent. Send someone over to pick some things up. I prefer earth tones. Just charge it to my room." She didn't even wait for a reply before walking away. It's mind-blowing. They are just used to getting everything they need, all the time, at a moment's notice. They are utterly dumbfounded when they hear the word no. Answer: oh yes. I watched a documentary once about a very fancy London hotel where a guest who was attending a wedding realized that she had left her shoes at home. These were, of course, super fancy shoes, made with the same fabric as the dress she had bought for the wedding and not easy to replace. She told the concierge, gave them her home address and keys, and a member of staff flew that same day to her home, I think in New York, retrieved the shoes, and flew back straight away, and made it in time so this woman could wear them. Story 19. But one of her best friends came to visit our humble home when I was 12 years old in 1992. She was an heiress to a huge fortune, and she had just come from Paris where she had seen the Calvin Klein runway show. She had liked the clothes so much that she bought the entire collection. However, since it was literally the pieces worn by the models, instead of off the rack, they didn't really fit the way they should, and sometimes her shirt just fell off. Luckily for her, she had just gotten a new boob job and was happy to show it off. She was on a lot of prescription pills and drank adult beverage from dawn to dusk, and also chain smoked. We didn't have a guest room, so she shared my bed. She would periodically wake up, take pills, and smoke, burning holes in my comforter. One night, she suddenly screamed in her sleep, "You better get that meanie out of my house or I'm calling the cops." 12-year-old me thought she was fascinating and hilarious. The night she woke me up screaming and cursing, I got out of bed and went in the living room to find my father watching the LA riots on TV because he said, "It's a lot more peaceful than what's going on here." Story 20. I have flown private jets for various wealthy individuals. People you would likely never know. They don't exist in the public sphere in the way someone like Bezos does. They don't always have some deep, dark thing that is unique to wealth. They're human. And the things, the emotions, the tendencies they exhibit are the same across the entire human spectrum. I've come away seeing wealth just makes you more of what you are. If you're mean, you're more mean. If you're nice, you're more nice. They still have problems, and some of that is tied to their wealth, which is family drama, having access to the wealth and raising children to be humble or entitled. They are more insulated from legal or political consequences. Answer: that's why a lot of new age people these days have come to look at money as just a form of energy. It isn't inherently good or bad, it just gives you the ability to impose your will on reality on a larger scale, whatever that may be. It's like gas in a car. The more you have, the further you can go, but it's ultimately still up to the driver which direction to go. Story 21. Worked for? No. But I worked for a high-end furniture store and delivered furniture to them for years when I was young. Most of them try to squeeze as much as they can out of you while paying as little as possible. So many times we would show up with furniture and they'd be trying to get us to move the whole fudge house around for them like we were United Van Lines. If we refused, they would call the manager and tell them we have to do it. Or they'd refuse the furniture, we can just leave, and they'd leave a bad review. Eventually, the manager made it clear to all customers, we are delivery service, not a move your shoot around service. Once that was solved, they'd try to bribe us with tips. A few times when we were broke, we agreed, and then they'd not give us the tip either by pretending they forgot and hope we wouldn't say anything, or they'd make up some bullshit reason to not tip us. Yeah. When you carried that 300 LAB armoire down to the basement, the third step is creaking now. It didn't do that before. We're going to have to use that tip money to contribute to the carpenter who is going to fix that step. Then when we'd give them the bill, they'd act like we were asking them for a small kidney and carry on about how much it was like we were stealing from them. Like they didn't